Okay, so let's get right into it. Imagine this. It's a freezing cold night in Boston, and a small, super organized group of colonists decides to risk everything.
Everything.
They go after this huge, valuable shipment of cargo and just dump it all into the harbor.
Right. And it's one of the best examples in history of how a group of determined people can literally change a country's future.
But you have to get this wasn't just a bunch of guys smashing things up.
No, not at all. It was a political statement. We call it the Boston Tea Party. But the tea was almost beside the point.
It was a symbol.
Exactly. It was all about this one powerful idea: no taxation without representation. That slogan wasn't just catchy, it was the main idea driving the whole American Revolution.
So let's back up a bit. What was going on that made everyone so angry? We're in the mid-1700s, Britain controls the 13 colonies,
Yeah.
and suddenly the British government needs money. A lot of money. Why?
It really all comes down to war debt. Britain had just won this huge conflict, the 7 Years' War, against France. It was fought all over the world, including right here in North America.
And winning wars is expensive.
Incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
So King George III and Parliament, they look over the colonies and think, well, we fought the war to protect them, so they should help pay for it.
Which, on the surface, might sound a little fair.
Maybe, but here's the problem. The colonists were being told to pay these new taxes, but they had absolutely no one in Parliament in London to speak for them.
No voice.
No voice. No one to argue their case or vote on their behalf. And for them, that was the deal breaker. They weren't just refusing to pay taxes, period.
Right.
They were refusing to be taxed by a government where they had zero representation.
Yeah.
It went against their fundamental rights as Englishmen.
And this anger just built and built, especially in Boston. Britain even sent troops to keep order, which only made things worse.
It made things much, much worse.
So, with all that tension, why on earth did the British think a new law about tea was a good idea? That brings us to the Tea Act of 1773.
Yeah, this is where it gets interesting. The Tea Act wasn't actually meant to punish the colonists. It was a corporate bailout
A bailout.
for one of the biggest companies in the world at the time, the East India Company. It was kind of like the Amazon of its day. Huge, powerful, but it was in serious financial trouble.
And I had a lot of tea it couldn't sell.
Mountains of it, sitting in warehouses in London. If the company failed, the whole British economy could have been dragged down with it.
Okay, so the Tea Act. Parliament lets the company sell its tea directly to the colonies, cutting out the middlemen.
And here's the twist. The tea was going to be cheaper than ever. Even cheaper than the tea that was being smuggled in from Holland.
So why didn't the colonists just say, great, cheap free, and move on?
Because they saw the trap. Britain made a huge miscalculation. They thought a good deal would make people forget about their political principles.
But there was a catch.
There was. That cheap tea still had that small, hated British tax on it. The colonists knew that if they bought the tea, they were basically agreeing that Parliament had the right to tax them.
It was a trick to get them to accept the tax. But there was an economic threat too, wasn't there?
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't just about principles. The Tea Act gave the East India Company a monopoly.
Meaning they were the only ones allowed to sell it.
Exactly. So if they could come in and sell tea cheaper than any local shop owner or merchant, they would crush the local economy. All those colonial businesses would be wiped out.
So that brought a whole other group of people into the protest, the business owners.
Yep. Suddenly you have the philosophers like Samuel Adams and the practical merchants and even smugglers, all on the same side, united against this.
So that sets the stage for what happened when the tea ships finally arrived in late 1773.
Right. The Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver. They sail into Boston Harbor, packed with hundreds of chests of this East India Company tea.
And the clock starts ticking.
Immediately. British law said the tax had to be paid within 20 days, or the cargo would be seized by customs officials.
And the royal governor, a guy named Thomas Hutchinson, was not going to back down.
Not a chance. He was a loyalist, a hardliner. He refused to let the ships leave the harbor until the tax was paid.
So the ships are stuck.
Totally stuck. Meanwhile, the citizens of Boston, organized by groups like the Sons of Liberty, are watching the docks day and night to make sure not a single chest of tea is unloaded. It was this incredibly tense standoff that lasted for weeks.
Let's talk about that group, the Sons of Liberty. They were the ones who turned this from a debate into action.
They were the organizers, the muscle.
Yeah.
This was not a spontaneous mob. The Sons of Liberty was a very effective secret group of patriots. You had Samuel Adams, John Hancock, Paul Revere.
Big names.
Huge names. And they used everything, flyers, public meetings, speeches, to rally people and keep the pressure on. Their goal was simple: that tea could not land.
And it all came to a head on the night of December 16th, 1773.
It did. Thousands of people were crammed into the Old South Meeting House. The mood was electric. Everyone was waiting to hear the governor's final decision.
And Samuel Adams was running the meeting. He gets word back from Governor Hutchinson, no deal. The ships will not be allowed to leave.
Right. And Adams stands up and says the famous words that this meeting could do nothing more to save the country.
Which was the secret signal.
That was the signal. And hundreds of men knew exactly what that meant. They poured out of the meeting house and headed straight for the docks.
And they were in disguise.
Yes, and this part is crucial. They used soot and coal dust to darken their faces, and some wore blankets and clothes to look like Mohawk Indians.
Why that disguise specifically? Was it just to hide who they were?
It was two things. First, yes, hiding their identity was critical. Destroying property like that was a crime punishable by death.
Wow.
But it was also symbolic. By dressing as Native Americans, they were creating a new identity, a uniquely American identity, separate from the British they were defying.
What's amazing to me is how disciplined they were. This wasn't a riot.
Not at all. That's the key point. They weren't looters. They split into 3 groups, boarded the 3 ships, and for hours they methodically smashed open the tea chests with axes.
And they made sure that only the tea was destroyed.
Only the tea. They didn't damage the ships. They didn't touch any of the other cargo. One guy was even caught trying to stuff some tea in his pockets, and they stopped him and threw it overboard.
It was purely a political act.
100%. It was a message.
And what a message. Do we know how much they actually destroyed?
We do. It was exactly 342 chests of tea. That's over 90,000 pounds of it. About 45 tons.
45 tons. That's an incredible amount of tea.
It would be worth millions of dollars today. The whole harbor was stained brown.
So, for the colonists, this was a huge victory. But in London, they must have been furious.
Furious is an understatement. When the news reached them, King George and Parliament saw it as an act of rebellion, anarchy. They decided Boston had to be punished, and punished severely, to make an example of it.
And that punishment came in the form of a series of new laws.
Laws the colonists called the Intolerable Acts.
They sound bad.
They were designed to crush the spirit of the city. First, the Boston Port Act. It completely closed the port of Boston to all trade.
The whole port. That's the city's entire economy.
Wiped out overnight. The idea was to starve them into submission. No goods in, no goods out, until the city paid for all that tea.
And it got worse.
Much worse. The Massachusetts Government Act basically canceled their right to self-government. It banned most town meetings, the very places where the resistance was planned, and gave the British governor almost total power.
Wow, so they took away their economy and their democracy.
And then, to top it off, they brought in a new quartering act.
Which meant what, exactly?
It meant colonists had to house British soldiers in their homes and other buildings, armed soldiers living with you in your house.
Yeah.
It was deeply invasive.
The British thought this would isolate Boston and scare the other colonies into behaving.
Right. And it was maybe the biggest mistake they made.
It had the exact opposite effect.
Completely. The other colonies, Virginia, New York, Pennsylvania, they looked at what was happening in Boston and they thought, if they can do that to them, they can do it to us next.
So instead of dividing them, it brought them all together.
It united them. That fear was the final push they needed, which led directly to the First Continental Congress in September 1774.
The first time the colonies really acted as one.
For the first time, leaders from almost every colony met in Philadelphia to plan a response. They decided to support Massachusetts.
And they did more than just talk, right? They took action.
Oh, yeah. They organized a massive unified boycott of all British goods. And they stopped sending American goods to Britons. They were going to hit them where it hurts the wallet.
And that unity, which started with this one act of defiance over tea, put them on a direct path to war.
A direct path. The tension from the Tea Party and the intolerable acts just kept escalating until the first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord the next spring, in April 1775.
And from there, it was a straight line to the Declaration of Independence in 1776. So when you look back at the whole story, the Boston Tea Party really wasn't about tea. It was about people showing they were willing to risk absolutely everything for a political belief.
It proved that the colonists wouldn't be forced to accept laws they had no part in making. It turned a fight over a tax into a bigger fight for freedom and self-government.
And that core idea that the people who are governed should have a voice in their government, is still one of the most important political values we have today.
It all comes back to that. It started right there
Yeah.
with those 342 chests of tea floating in Boston Harbor.
Good luck with your studies.